welcome to our show, Efauji Talks, an IESECCI initiative which promises to get inspiring speakers and brilliant speakers on board each episode. I am Shavinder Kaur, the brand head of this show. Please welcome a human resource and L&D professional with 25 years of corporate experience, Ms. Debjani Roy, who is known in the industry as truly transformational HR stalwart with a career profile to manage. Hi, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am. Very kind words from your side. Absolute pleasure to be on this platform with you.
Great. So before we start the conversation, I want my viewers to get acquainted with our speaker's achievements and applauds and eclats that she has accomplished during her career span. Ms. Roy is a Chief Human Resource Officer at Kromozones Software Private Limited, a postgraduate in Human Management Studies from FMS, Delhi University, with innumerable HR and L&D certifications under her belt. Ms. Roy charted her career across organizations such as NALCO, Bharti, HCL, Tech, Bentley, Systems, SR Diagnostic, amongst others. While I was reading your profile, I was really elated to read so much, beautiful, I must say, achievements that you have achieved during your career span. Awarded with many times during her career for her reputation as an exemplary professional in the HR field. Well, she believes in giving back as much as possible as a coach, counselor, mentor for those to it needs, Besides being involved with startups and boards of academic institution in advisory capacity. So, Ms. Debjani, it's brilliant to read all this. I'm sure you have done a lot during your career span. And the cause of girl, child, and woman is very dear to her heart. She also run a boutique HR advisory firm, Wind Beneath the Wings Venture LLP, as founder and CEO. She's also the CHRO in advisory capacity of startups, Kromozones Private Limited, as I've already mentioned, and known by the brand name Mind Your Fleet. Last but not the least, Ms. Debjani officiates as strategic advisor on the academic board of multiple B and E schools, curating courses, offering workshops, boot camps, FDPs to faculties, and MDPs to the corporate personnel. It is brilliant, and I must say it's beautiful to know Mr. Roy. And I once again welcome you to our Fauji Talk Show, which has the motto is to choose to challenge.
I think that line resonates with me because most of the times in my lifetime, I've chosen to challenge many a paradigm. And that's what brought me where I am today.
Absolutely commendable. There is no doubts and there are no second thoughts about it. So while I was reading your bio, I read about a couple of things. So some questions which are coming in my mind is like, nowadays biasm is something that really matters to all of us. So what is your take on uncautious buyers and where do the biases come from?
I don't think there's a single person who doesn't carry biases in the mind. Biases are most of the time unconscious, unexpressed, and it actually stays in the subconscious mind. But they are very much entrenched into the thinking pattern of an individual. So these are typically thought processes deeply insinuated within your personalities, some stereotypes, some kind of understandings that you carry about people, which may or may not be true. But in your day-to-day life, you actually practice them in such a manner that it actually affects your decision-making as well as your behavioral patterns in multiple ways. To give you a very simple example to start off with, in Indian households, when a little girl is born and a little boy is also, seen to play with her at the same time, we generally, if we find the boy playing with the doll, one of the things we say is, oh my God, why the hell is the boy playing with the doll? He should be playing with cars. Similarly, the mother rebukes the girl if the girl picks up a car instead and is not seen to be playing with the doll. So these are stereotypes which we find so deeply entrenched that it starts right from the time of childhood, and our value system is made that way. Unfortunately, it has also got professed in the corporate world, in the academic world. So wherever you go, wherever you see, unconscious bias is definitely at play.
Yes, true. Because some kind of stereotypical behavior can affect anybody's or somebody's mindset.
Yeah,
And being an educator, I personally know how it can affect people, even children from the formative years of their life.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that is there. So when we are talking about bias, and what kind of workplace decision can be affected by unconscious bias, according to you?
Well, the very common one to start with in the workplace is when you are hiring somebody. For instance, if you're in the hiring panel and you suddenly come across a candidate who comes from the same state or happens to have studied in the same school or college that you went to, there is a sense of deja vu. And the first thing that you say is, oh, you're an alumni of that college that happens to be mine. So automatically that unconscious bias starts playing in your mind, and everything else, including the fact that probably the previous candidate would have done well answering questions, becomes a little bit, invisible in the past. And this unconscious bias starts formulating your decision in favor of this particular candidate thereafter. So these kind of very, very commonplace hiring decisions sometimes fall prey at the altar of unconscious bias. Secondly, a very, very important bias that is played out is the gender bias. Okay, it is automatically thought that in certain kind of work is not suitable for the fairer sex. Now that, unfortunately, today is something which cannot be accepted, because today we are agnostic to gender. We are all rubbing shoulder to shoulder. We are vying for the same jobs. You are in the armed forces fraternity. You know for a fact that some of the restrictions which were there for the ladies earlier no longer come into being. And very recently, we have the first complete combat section of ladies, the black cats as they are called, have been commissioned by the president of India, and which is an all woman squad. So if the ladies can do everything the way the men can, lift the heavy artillery, work on machinery, can do the nuts and bolts equally well, then there's no reason why we should allow such gender gaps to play as a bias at the workplace. But unfortunately, it still continues to be there. And that determines a lot of decisions when it comes to progression, when it comes to promotion, when it comes to allocation of a job. The third very important and very commonplace is the age bias. Sometimes when you have anything to do with digital or something which is known as, tech savvy, a little more tech savvy jobs, or something to do more with AI and, machine learning, you automatically give it to the Gen Z. You automatically think that the Gen Z would be able to apply themselves better to it. But irrespective of the fact that 2 generations back, maybe the baby boomers have done enough study, enough upskilling to be able to come to terms with it. So we have a paradigm problem happening at the workplace today where, people who have been with experience and people who worked there for a long time are suddenly getting overshadowed by this huge bias that it's the now generation, the current crop of youngsters who are better adept at handling technology. So that again becomes a very, very pronounced unconscious bias at the workplace. These are very pronounced ones, but then there are biases with name, there is a halo effect bias, there are confirmation biases. It starts the other way around. For instance, I may hold a belief very close to my heart. Suddenly, when I work into the workplace, I start finding things which automatically start conforming to what I already hold very close to heart. So it's almost like I'm every time seeking a phenomena or a statement or a visual which complements what I already have in my mind. So that's kind of confirmation bias, as we call it. So taken together, there are n number of these unconscious biases which are at play at the workplace.
Absolutely. And then that will lead to many conflicts.
Yes.
Then we are, resolving them and other issue, and it becomes a major task to do that. So, thank you so much for explaining those in such details, because at times unconsciously we are not even aware that this is what we are doing. As you said, I belong to the army fraternity, and very categorically, what you mentioned is, of course, the women gender is absolutely inducted in the army with that kind of ism is, of course, It is, I'll not say it is totally, disappearing, but of course, to some extent, we can feel that, thankfully, I think developing in our mind thought also, that is there. So, when you talk about unconscious bias, we do also talk about microaggressions. So, is there any connection between them?
Well, they are probably two sides of the same coin. Very simply put, microaggressions are basically your verbal, behavioral, or environmental kind of stimuli or types of behaviors, which typically form a negative impression around a thing, a person, a situation, or whatever. They can be very nasty. They can be very direct. They can actually be very, very, direct, insulting a person at a very core. And sometimes they come from a situation in the mind which is completely, as we said, unconscious again. So microaggressions are things which again are a mental phenomena which takes part because of many years of biases, many years of stereotypes, many years of deeply entrenched thought processes which one would have borrowed either by observing people at home or by growing up within certain amount of value systems, and that suddenly becomes an outpouring towards the other person. So similar to a what we call an unconscious bias or implicit bias, as we call it. Okay, a microaggression is typically a verbalization or an expression of a similar phenomena to the external person.
True, exactly. All right, so let's change the discussion. You've been into HR, the masters, and you've done a lot in the HR department. I want to have the insight. Is the HR fraternity today mentally and emotionally equipped to take a slightly revised role profile, owing to the pandemic issues presently?
Well, yes and no. And I'll explain why the yes and why the no. I think by virtue of the fact that HR has always been in the forefront of every challenge as and when it has presented itself, this particular set of people, the fraternity as we call it, themselves are very adept at quickly changing, quickly adapting, and being flexible enough to start responding in the way that the current workplace actually demands. Because this is that one function which works with human capital. See, the rest of anything that you have in an organization are inarticulate, whether it's the capital you work with, the money that you work with, the infrastructure, the chairs and table, the technology, the machines and equipments, everything is inarticulate. But when it comes to the human mind, that's the most dynamic thing that HR gets to work with. So there is no choice for an HR person but to be emotionally as well as intrinsically careful enough to adapt to the situation the moment it presents itself. However, we also need to understand the other side of it, which is the competence and the preparedness of that HR person to quickly move from one foot to another. Unfortunately, Shavinder, when the pandemic hit us, and I say us because I think each one of us faced it in some measure or the other, the HR, to start with, at the initial phase, was caught in a little bit of a wrong footing because it was so unprecedented. It came in such a huge scale. It was something which was never ever anticipated in our lifetime. We had never seen anything like a lockdown. We had never seen suddenly being told that 80% of your workforce needs to work out of home. Earlier, even mentioning that you had to work out of home had to be an exception. You either had to be a very supreme performer or you had to have some problems with your health or something because of which you had to be at home. Otherwise, you're a social animal. And workplace is defined with all of us coming together and creating this kind of social connect, which is what organizations are all about. And HR used to basically hone its skill on the ability of using the physical presence of the employees to master their art. Suddenly, you had a complete change in paradigm. Half the people were gone. The physical place of a workplace completely underwent a change. You did not even know what tomorrow was holding for you. Even today, when we talk about the third wave, we really don't know what's the third wave really going to be spelling out. Whether we're going to have a normalcy after that, it'll be a hybrid factor, whether things will change into a third dynamic, we really don't know what to anticipate. So you have to understand that even if HR emotionally and intrinsically has always been prepared to take on the challenges head on, it's taken a little bit of a time for us to also skill up and build our competence so as to be able to face the problems in the right manner. So the ability, the understanding, the knowledge, and the intentions have all been there, but probably the scaling up and the ability to handle. And one example would be technology. HR has taken its time to warm up to technology, because there have been a lot of the members in the fraternity who've not really wanted to handle technology in such a large measure as it is today, because it is a human function. And when it comes to a human function, technology makes it a little more impersonal. So it's always been a little tug of war between how much of human and how much of technology. But today we have no choice. It's all technology. So we are now learning a different set of HR philosophy, where the humanness has to be practiced, but has to be practiced within the overall realm of the digital space, of this huge technology revolution that has come into space. So I think that's the dilemma. But in all, I think the HR definitely has it within themselves to scale up and deliver what is required today.
Indeed, I totally agree to this. Me, I myself being head of the academic institute, so I personally feel dealing with human resource is the most difficult resource is the human resource, and because it's so dynamic. So we need to be adapting to things which will help us to again adapt to the atmosphere, the change, because change is constant, and this it's an unknown enemy for us right now, and we need to deal with it. So we will have to scale up to that level. Something that exists today may not even exist after 5 years.
Well,
So
yeah.
absolutely, we have to be, upgrading ourselves to that level. So that's a beautiful insight that you have mentioned. Moving on with the same discussion, the changing role of HR is the HR's leadership moment. So what's your take on that?
Well, yes, I think it cannot be repudiated that there is no better time than now for the HR fraternity to showcase its strength. Because as I just said in the previous answer, we are best equipped from an emotional standpoint, from a competence standpoint, from an agility standpoint, to quickly shift gear and move into, as we say, our second avatar, our third avatar, as many as required in order to face the challenges at the workplace. So when it comes to not only holding the hands of the workforce in dealing with the new kinds of working patterns that we have today, we are also the master builders of competence of an organization. For instance, we may have to make sure that the workforce has better ways of managing their work from home. That's one part of the job. But the other part of the job is even more challenging, which is because of this dispersed and remote ways of working. The managerial and the leadership bandwidth today in organizations is severely crippled. Okay, the managers have till now held teams in physical presence. Suddenly, when most of their teams are gone and they have to keep managing in remote, okay, the ways of managing that well and making sure that productivity, performance, okay, metrics are all measured properly, and productivity does not get a hit, and everything is in its place, and the employee also feels that he continues to be a valued part and does not go astray. These are immediate calls of leadership. And in order to make sure that the current managers and leaders are equipped to deal with it in the remote space, it's again the HR fraternity which has had to put learning systems in place, which has been coaching and counseling and mentoring these managers every day in and day out to put these new kind of systems of management in place. I think that's what makes the function of HR so supremely giving in a sense, because you have to really take care of every part of that organization, while at the same time taking care of yourself too, because if you don't take care of yourself, you will not be able to deliver for the others. So I think it's a major paradigm shift. This is the moment of calling. We have to rise up, we have to respond. Otherwise, many of us will probably move out of the space completely. We will not be able to shape up in order to respond to the current challenges.
Exactly, as we have already discussed earlier, because we need to definitely work a one notch up, then only we're going to sustain into the situations. So, when we are talking about the pandemic, so according to you, leadership and managerial bandwidth has taken a beating during the, pandemic. So HR has to felicitate building them back. So how ready are they,
Well, as I said, I mean, it's a continuous learning cycle now. I think that's another very critical aspect that has come back. That, the learning curve, which may have hit, like if you are a CHRO, for instance, of an organization, many of our fraternity members feel that I've already achieved that peak. I'm already there. I have about 25 to 30 years of experience behind me. What more could you be expecting me to learn? But this is learning of an unprecedented scale. This is not something which is a normal organizational challenge. It's not a restructuring. It's not a profitability gap. It's not a go to market strategy. It's something which is much, much more galactic. It's global. It's something which is now not controlled by the human factor. And the locus of control is completely outside. So when you have this kind of a challenge, then the learning curve has to go absolutely rapidly up. Not only do you have to understand what the external circumstance, what the environment is telling you, but also make sure that your people in the organization, whether it's the managerial streams or the non-managerial streams, whether it's the workforce at the shop floor or the leader or the CXOs, the ones who are heading the departments, whether they have the abilities to deliver, whether they are communicating the messages well, whether they are empathetic and compassionate to understand what's the need of the hour, whether they are practicing authentic leadership, whether they are genuinely concerned about people or not, or whether it's just a false claim and a few words here and there. That could have still made a leader survive 10 years back when they were stable state organizations. But today, if you are not authentic, if you're not genuine, people see through you and they are not ready to invest their trust and their faith in such a critical time on leaders who can't walk the talk. So therefore, it's a big responsibility for leaders, and HR is the one who are holding the hands of both the segments to take them forward. So they are the linking pin. They are basically trying to bridge the gaps of competence, which needs to be built on both sides, including themselves. I think it's a journey. We are on that journey. As you said, how well are we positioned? We are there most of the time. But then, as I said, the learning curve is enormous today. The learning will not end, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years.
Truly. In fact, my thought is that, in this entire journey, a good IPR is also very important. Your interpersonal relationships is the, I think the skeleton crux of it. That's how everything will, place into a right position where we need to. I'm absolutely loving the conversation with you, but so I've come to the end of the show. But before that, I really want to ask you, what are your tips for or the advices for the generation next, or for the HR professional for that matter?
So that's two set of people. Gen Next, which is really the Gen Z, the newcomers, the new ones on the block. I think they are an astutely intelligent group of people. They carry more than the deserving share of intellect. They are positively inclined. They are a bundle of energy. But honestly speaking, all those qualities can go to the dogs, can come to nothing if you don't know how to organize, plan, and execute them well. So I think some of the things that will be my suggestion and my recommendations for the Gen Next is, please don't take shortcuts. That's something which I'm realizing the Gen Z is very keen to take on. In their race for aspiration, in their aspirational ability to climb and get to the top very fast, they are akin to taking shortcuts. They're ready to actually bleed the other. They rise on the basis of climbing on somebody else's shoulders and not give credit where it's due. These are not qualities which are, which will take you far. You will soon realize that the kind of peak that you will achieve will be quite like the house of cards, and you will fall faster than you actually think. So you've still got to go traditional. Of course, the pace has become much more. You can go to the top much faster. Technology will enable to get you there much faster. But at the end of the day, there are no shortcuts. You have to be convincing. You have to know your studies. You have to know your theories. You have to know your application skills. And most important, you have to know your mind and your heart. Because the more senior you get, the less you work on tactics and the more you work on man management. So your ability to take people along, gel with them, be empathetic, make teams work, and reach out to them in their moments of stress, that's going to hold you in very high respect. And that's what Gen Next needs to master more than anything else. As for the HR fraternity, just one sentence. Please stop being in the 3G generation when what is required is 5G.
Great, absolutely. That's really nice. I always say, the more you bleed in peace, the less the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. The,
Absolutely.
the preparedness is very important, and I'm sure this episode is going to be an insight and an eye opener for many upcoming or the aspirant HR professional. I'm indeed honored and privileged to host you, Ms. Roy, and it was indeed a great conversation. And when you go beyond yourself, that's when magical things can happen, and that's what describes about Ms. Roy. Thank you once again for being the part of this interesting women's special series, Choose to Challenge.
Thank you so much, Ravinder. Thank you to IESECCI and Efauji. I think these are noble causes. You're doing such a fabulous job, and thank you for having me on the platform. It has been really, really enriching. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all your cooperation and sparing your time. We wish, if you wish to share any other inspiring story, please contact me at shavi@efaujitalks.com. I thank all our viewers. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Efauji Talks. And do not forget to put your reviews on this episode, as because this is an insight to the HR professional. For more interesting stories, please stay tuned. Till then, stay home, stay safe. Jai Hind.
Thank you.
Fauji Talks is brought to you by IESECCI, Indian Ex-Defence Service Employees Chamber of Commerce and Industries. Thanks to its vast veteran network and global and pan-India associates, IESECCI can carry out various commerce facilitations and CSR projects across India and the world. Some of IESECCI's core capability areas are Skill India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, Digital India, any ex-serviceman welfare or job program, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan related projects, telemedicine and healthcare training and job scheme, Save Water scheme, defense industry SME, MSME cluster and hub development, maritime training and inland water training with job facilitation, Canada study, job and permanent residency opportunity, e-commerce, Andaman and Nicobar commerce opportunities. IESECCI's global reach includes countries like Indonesia, Slovakia, Canada, Nepal, Singapore, Rwanda, USA, UK. Above all, it is IESECCI's effort to create a veterans brand made by the veterans, for the veterans and made up of the veterans. Every Indian's support is invaluable in this journey. IESECCI is a registered society for ex-servicemen's welfare and envisions that every veteran should be a part of India's economic growth story. It is the aim of IESECCI to create an enabling commerce platform that will empower and synergize the veterans' talent pool. This is possible only with the support of entrepreneurs, businesses and consultants from civil society. All proceeds, if any, are utilized for the welfare of ex-servicemen and for public charity.